He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years' experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Alabama's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right. You're listening to Legal Lowdown, your Alabama lawyer here on WERC 105.5, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. We're back for our weekly show. We have a great guest in the studio today. Attorney General Steve Marshall will be here the second hour. We will be glad to have his time, and you will want to listen to him. He's running for the United States Senate as a Republican. Next week, folks, we have Congressman Barry Moore here. He is running for the same seat for the United States Senate. He has been endorsed by President Trump, by Vice President J.D. Vance, and the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune. So you get the opportunity to hear both of the two leading candidates for the United States Senate back to back. Steve Marshall, Barry Moore in 2 weeks. So you don't want to miss that. We always invite you to listen to our show, download our podcast, share it with your friends and family. Our podcast numbers are really growing. They're really ticking up. I have to ask you to do this. We haven't done this before, John. It's great if you listen to the podcast. I need you to go out there just like a Google review and rate the podcast, because here's why. There is a search in Alabama where they are rating podcasts. And one thing that we are lacking is that we don't have a lot of reviews for our podcast. But if we did, our show would grow and it might be a little bit better. So just a little plug for me. Go to your iPodcast where you listen to the show. Go to Spotify, wherever. Just give us a 5-star review, please, so that our audience will grow. As always, our featured sponsor of our show is Spy for Rent. Jeff Hammock, Corey Fuller are the names to know for private investigators in the state of Alabama, and they are the exclusive investigators for my firm. We represent people from Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile, Tuscaloosa. If you need a call my office, 205-825-5297, or just look us up on the web, joeingramlaw.com. joeingramlaw.com is all you need to know for legal representation in the state of Alabama. We're going to talk a little bit today about hiring your divorce lawyer and how it starts. The reason we're going to talk about that is my office has a rule that, generally speaking, we do not take a case if you've already had one divorce lawyer in your case. And here's the reason why. You come in and you say, Joe, I hired this divorce lawyer and I'm not really happy how things are going. And then you start giving me lots of information. Things may not be going well in your case. And I'm thinking, well, even if you hire me, am I going to be any better? Or is it maybe that the facts are not really persuasive to whatever your issues are, meaning alimony, custody of your children, division of asset, things of that nature. So generally speaking, we are not the second dog at the trough. Now, that being said, there are the occasions where I do take the case, where I go look at the case online, we look at the docket history, and we see that the case is so bundled that we take over. Sometimes we do. And here's a big one where we don't take the case. When you come in and start trashing your lawyer, my lawyer didn't do this and my lawyer didn't do that. And I'm thinking, well, if you're not happy with them, you're not going to be happier with me, and you're going to trash me next. That's a sign that you get booted out the door. So that's something to think about when you hire your divorce lawyer. When people come in for a divorce consultation with me, generally speaking, we spend between 60 and 90 minutes with you. And in that time, I try to develop a dialogue. I try to see if it's a good fit for you and for my firm, and if we're going to have enough good chemistry to work together. And I'm going to ask you, what do you want out of your divorce? Is it money? Is it children? Is it custody? What is it you really want out of your divorce, and how are you going to help me to achieve that? And if I don't feel like it's a good fit, we decline cases. We have declined several here in the last few weeks. So that's my thought about hiring a divorce lawyer. Okay? National legal news this week. We were talking before we came on the show. They said, what do we talk about? What do we talk about? There's so much out there. And there is. First thing I want to talk about is the war with Iran. It is a war. It's not an excursion. It's not whatever they want to call it for polling purposes. It's a war now. And if you've ever read the book Sun Tzu, Art of War, and ever done any other reading on war, your opponent has a decision as well when the war is over. You just don't get to say, we're done, we're going to call it a day, we're finished. Doesn't happen that way. And the way this thing is unfolding, it's going to look like when George Bush flew the plane onto the aircraft carrier, and they had the big banner up and it said mission accomplished, and it wasn't. That's not where we're headed here. Oil is trading between, roughly $107, $112 a barrel on the market. At the pump, right before the war started, we were paying roughly $2.17 a gallon. I think I filled up today. It was $3.39 a gallon, which is a huge increase for the average American in the country. And now we're talking about the 82nd Airborne, and roughly, I've heard numbers as high as 10,000 troops being deployed. That is scary, because now we're looking like we're going to invade a country of 90 million people that has mountains and caves. This is different than Iran. This is similar to Afghanistan. However, they have much more weaponry than Afghanistan did. This is looking like mission creep. Yes, I said it. It's got all the hallmarks coming. And I don't know what the off-ramps are. And do not believe that anybody in Iran is telling you they're trying to negotiate. President Trump is the one going out there saying they want to make a deal. They want to make a deal. They want to make a deal. No, he wants to make a deal because he's getting blowback from Republicans saying, hey, we have an election in November. We have people going on vacation. Gas prices are up. It's affecting everybody's pocketbook right now. All the good stuff that we've been doing for the last 14, 15 months is not helping us right now. So we got to do something. So there's a lot going on. If you're familiar with former Secretary of Defense under Trump's first administration, General Mathis, he was a former Marine commandant. He gave a speech this week. He said we've hit roughly 15,000 targets. It's great. However, we do not have a clear mission on how to achieve victory and end this. And that's a problem. And I'm just wondering, how did we get here? Did we get here from Trump's former real estate lawyer and his son-in-law Kushner saying diplomacy's failed at mediation, let's go to war? Where is the Pentagon? Where are the generals? And where are the people of the Secretary of State and the CIA saying these are the best options, these are the things we should do, and these are the things we shouldn't do? Because now we've got a country that is full of a bunch of zealots, and they don't care if we go back to the Stone Age. They do not care. They have screamed for 47 years, death to Israel, death to America. They do not care. And now they have held the Strait of Hormuz hostage. And now they're talking about charging $2 million a boat to come through. This is a bad, bad look for America. Sorry. It is. So, Trump's war choice has morphed into a war of necessity. I don't know about that. We still have the shutdown at the airports. However, they have brought in, Trump has brought in some TSA agents at the airport to help with that. He also passed a executive, what's the word I'm looking for? Executive, just lost my train of thought. Executive order. Thank you, Joe. You just lost your mind on a Saturday morning. Executive order to pay the TSA people. Sorry about that, folks. Big national legal news this week. We're talking about that. There's some big national legal news that we've been following the last couple of weeks. Do you remember the Meta Facebook trial? Verdict came in for the plaintiffs. And I'm sorry, I do not agree with this. I do not agree with this verdict. And they had all these moms standing out there with pictures of their children that have committed suicide, blaming it on looking at Facebook and Instagram and all this stuff. And my thought is, at what point did you concede being a parent to Facebook or YouTube or Instagram? Where was your responsibility as an adult? I'm not trying to be cold here. I just don't agree with this. Anytime something bad happens to somebody, we want to blame whatever big corporation is that has the money, just like I always bring up the cigarette issue. If I started a company and I made a pen, I guess when I sold the pen, my disclaimer would say something like, this product at some point in time in the future in some way may be used in some unfortunate, harmful way, and you've been put on notice, so you can't sue me. That's where we are in America. Whatever the product is, we have all these consumer protection laws, and we need this stuff. I'm not wrong there. But we just want to sue somebody because whatever happened in our life. I just don't agree with that. I just don't understand that one. And then we finally got the verdict the last week in the Elon Musk trial related to Twitter or X, the stock. And we picked that one. That was an easy one to pick. The richest man on the globe. Do you think anybody has any sympathy for him trying to say whether or not he manipulated the stock price before he bought the company? No, absolutely not. I think in some ways Elon Musk could have done what he did with a company checking the bots of Twitter or X or whatever you call it to see how many users are out there instead of him doing it personally. But he's a smart man. I mean, he's much smarter than me. Look what all he's created. But he got hit in the pocketbook, and he may appeal just because he's got nothing to lose. He's got the money. He can pay the interest on the judgment. So why not appeal it? But that are the two biggest verdicts that's come out in the last week that we have been following nationally, is the Facebook trial and the Twitter trial. And then I got an email this week from a plaintiff firm here in the state of Alabama. We are partnering with anybody in the state that may have a claim against Facebook that has a similar issue for their children that may have been harmed by Meta. I deleted it. Some point to be responsible for your children and your own actions. I just really believe that. If you've been paying attention the last couple of weeks, I have been talking about Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina. We didn't get to talk about this last week because we ran out of time. The Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, his term is going to end here in May. That's when his term is up. And they have to have a hearing before the Senate Banking Committee to have a hearing to nominate the new Fed chairman, and then it goes to the full Senate for the vote. Well, here's the rub. Federal Reserve Jerome Powell testified before the Senate Banking Committee a while back, and they're trying to say that he lied about the cost of the building, and so the DOJ did not say they were going to charge him. They simply sent him a subpoena and asked for documents and records and to clarify his statement as to the cost of the new Federal Reserve building. That's all they did. And Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell runs out and makes it look like that Trump's trying to come down on him because he would not cut the interest rates for America. And the Federal Reserve is supposed to be neutral, unbiased, above the fray, just like the Supreme Court. And now Trump's being attacked for that. And so Thom Tillis, who is leaving the Senate this time, he's not going to run again, came out during the Kristi Noem bashing about 2 weeks ago, if you remember us talking about that, and said that there will be no hearings until the issue with Jerome Powell is cleared up and you've cleared his name. Well, now we are at the end of March. We are into April. They're about to take their recess for Easter week. And this is backfiring because a federal judge threw out the federal DOJ subpoenas and said, no. And so then you have the appointed Attorney General for the District of Columbia, who is Jean Pirro, who used to be on Fox News. And she got in a little tit fight with the judge, and she said, I'm going to go appeal this. I think I have a right to the records. So now this is a fight between the DOJ and a federal judge. And how does this affect you? Well, here's how this affects you. If we do not get a new Federal Reserve chairman, we may be stuck with Jerome Powell. I've done a little reading. It's kind of open-ended. Does he get to stay? Or does he just leave and the position stay open? I don't know the answer to that question. I've done a little reading. I don't have the answer. And I don't know that anybody else does right now. But we need somebody as the Federal Reserve chairman. And you got to have a hearing, and the hearings take a couple of days for a position like this. And then the full Senate has to take it up in a vote. And so the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking now. And I think I'm going to be right on this one. I'm going to tell you that we are not going to have Kevin Warsh in place by the time that Jerome Powell's term ends in May. It's just not working out in the days. It's just not. Another big story I want to talk about this week, and we've been talking about this for weeks, and it's starting to hit the news. Deutsche Bank, which is a huge bank, just announced a $30 billion credit write-down. Joe, what are you talking about? Well, if you listen to my man of Wall Street, Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Bank, he's been talking about how the federal regulators have taken their fingers off the switch the last few years. We have a lot of bad debt on bank balance sheets, and they're starting to write it down. What does that mean? Well, look at the stock market. Look what's going on in the Federal Reserve Bank issues. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, how they had to put so much money into the system, liquidity-wise, a few weeks ago. There is a lot of talk about, are we headed for another market crash? 1929 was the Great Depression of the stock market. We are in 2026. There are a lot of smart economists and financial people that I read their commentary and follow them every week. And there's a lot of debate going on about what's going on with the banking system right now and the stock market. I'm not telling you to stop putting money in your 401ks. I'm just telling you I'd be a little cautious right now about what you decide to do with your money. There are some stories out there that they're talking about BlackRock, these big financial institutions that hold all the 401k money. They're talking about doing a digitized cryptocurrency to get us off the dollar, off the greenback. I try to keep up with this information, but it's a little wonky to follow. But there's a lot of stuff out there right now, and there's a lot of disinformation out there right now, and I'm not trying to put out either. I'm just telling you, you need to go do some research and listen to some of this stuff, because all of it affects our pocketbooks. And if you just filled up your gas tank this morning to take your kids out for the park, you know what I'm talking about. It cost me $52 to fill up today, and it didn't cost that much a month ago. So anyway, you're listening to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer. You can always reach my office at joeingramlaw.com, joeingramlaw.com. In the second hour, we're going to have the Attorney General of the state of Alabama, Steve Marshall, is going to be here for the second hour. He's running for the United States Senate. You do not want to miss that interview. He's been the Attorney General for 10 years in the state of Alabama. He's been the top prosecutor. He's done a lot of good work. And you want to listen to somebody that's going to be running for the United States Senate. We're going to go to news and weather, and then we'll be back after the break.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, we're back for the second segment of the first hour to Legal Lowdown. Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer, on WERC 105.5 FM, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. Thank you for listening in. As always, the sponsor of our show is Spy for Rent. Spy for Rent is the name to know for an investigator in the state of Alabama. Jeff Hammett, Corey Fuller are the only names you need to know if you need an investigator in Alabama. They are the exclusive partner of my firm, and they are the best at what they do, and they can help you if you need them. All you got to do is look up Spy for Rent, and they'll be glad to assist you. We talked a little bit about hiring a divorce lawyer. When I want to go back to this just a minute because I left something out that was really important. When clients come in and they sit down and they talk to me, and we have to go through their biographical information, education, jobs, children, money, finances, bank accounts, 401k statements, assets, liabilities, all that stuff. And then the conversation always goes to, okay, how did you get here today in my office? Whether someone is about to file for divorce or someone has already been served with a divorce complaint and they're hiring me to represent them to answer the divorce complaint. And 95% of the time, the client knows why they're there. They know it was coming. They know what the issues are in the marriage, whether it's infidelity, whether it's incompatibility, whether the children are grown and are out the door, and we call that a gray divorce now, or whether someone has a substance issue or an alcohol issue, or maybe someone's got an addiction to pornography, or maybe it's, just can't get along, verbal and physical abuse in the marriage. And we go through all those issues. And sometimes you have to ask really tough questions. When's the last time you and your spouse were sexually intimate? And that'll tell you a lot. Well, we sleep in separate bedrooms. I haven't had sex with my spouse in 5 years. That tells you a lot. Or somebody comes in and they say, me and my spouse sleep in the same bed and we are still sexually intimate. And then they come in and they tell you something like, I went to my doctor and I think I have transmitted a sexual disease. And I haven't been with anybody else. That's a huge issue. Because when you file your complaint, now you got the burden of proof to prove that you got it from your spouse that got it from somebody else. But if you can prove that, that's huge damages and liabilities. That falls into tort claims for receiving a sexually disease from your spouse. And I've had those cases, and those are really hard to have those conversations. And, sometimes people come in and after we get all their information, I'll say, okay, let's pretend for a minute that I'm your spouse and we're sitting in a room, maybe like for marriage counseling. What is the worst thing that your spouse would say to me about you? And then they'll give you the lines. And 90% of the time, they already know they're right. It'll say something like, well, my spouse is not involved with me or the kids and comes home and eats dinner and goes to bed or goes to their room. Or somebody will come in and say something like, my husband hasn't been home in months. He pays the bills, but he's been living in an apartment, and I don't know where he's staying. And I believe he's got a significant other. And so those are the kind of issues you hear all the time. And then there are the other kind of cases where someone will come in and somebody will say, my spouse filed for divorce last week, came house, and the house is cleaned out and they're gone. And I'll say, well, did you have any idea what's coming? No, I had no idea. I was totally shocked. And I'll say, you had no clue? No, I had no clue. That means that their spouse was a really good poker player. That means they didn't give up anything before they did what they did. And I bring this up because we're getting to that time of year. We are just past spring break week. School season is about to be out. And this is the time of year when people put homes on the market, when people start thinking about summer vacation. People start thinking about, do I leave my spouse to go find somewhere else to live, to either stay in the school system I'm in or move somewhere else to get in another school system? So, unfortunately, just like the first of the year, we get a second wave of divorces that come in April and right before May, right before school's out every year. People plan them. People plan their divorces that are really smart at what they're doing. They say, okay, if I file the complaint now and school ends first, second week of May, then hopefully I'll have a hearing by mid-June, and the judge will say you can move with the children or get the spouse out of the house or whatever, and then you're ahead for the next school year. Happens every year. We see those cases. And also along those lines, we need to talk a little bit about people that have just come off spring break or going to spring break. If you're sending your kids off for spring break or have just sent them off, there's something to think about here. Tell them to make good decisions, not bad decisions. Tell them to, if they're going to drink, and if they're honest, you say, I know you're going to drink. Don't get behind the wheel of a car. Or if you're going to use drugs, meaning marijuana, please do not get behind the wheel of a car and drive if you're going to be drinking or using alcohol. Because not only could you possibly get a DUI, you might actually injure somebody, or God forbid, you kill somebody. That's the biggest thing we have to worry about with someone using alcohol or drugs behind the wheel of a car. And so those are the kind of conversations that mom and dads need to be having when they send their kids off for spring break. And also coming up with prom season. Yes, prom season is upon us. And, a lot of folks will rent a limousine and they'll split the cost between 4 or 5 couples to go for a prom. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But prom season is the time of year when moms and dads needs to have really big conversations with their teenage children about driving a car and using alcohol, or driving a car and using some kind of substance, marijuana, some kind of pill, whatever. You don't want your prom night to be the night that you remember for the biggest mistake in your life. And not only is it just alcohol and drugs, a lot of people, after they go to the prom, will go rent a hotel room. And you need to have conversations with your children. You know, if they're going to have sexual relations, they need to be planned, and they need to protect themselves. And along those lines, in today's society, you got to be really careful that your children are smart enough that they don't put themselves in a position where someone makes a claim that a child was assaulted sexually in some way and did not give consent. And those cases happen a lot, and we get those cases in our office all the time. And you have to have those conversations with your children this time of year. So whether it's going on spring break or going to the prom, everybody has spring fever. Everybody's out having fun. I get all that. We all want to have fun. Let's just do it safe. Protect your children. Have good conversations with them. Be good moms and dads. Cover the basics with them. Oh, and the biggest issue going around these days is everybody's got a phone, iPhone, whatever kind of phone you have, Samsung, whatever. There's all kind of new technology out there. There's all these AI programs. There's one in particular that I've talked about on a TV station that I was on about a year ago. It's called Undressed AI. And what you can do is you can take a picture of someone, and the program knows how to undress the person in the picture and manipulate that picture in however they want to, in any sexual way that they want to. Now, that is a crime, because if you send those pictures out, you have disseminated them. That is a crime. Not only is it a crime, it does not matter if the child is 16 or 17, because the law in the state of Alabama now says that they are charged as an adult for that. And yes, they are doing that now. And that is a Class A felony in the state of Alabama, which means it carries a penalty of 10 years to 99 years in a prison. And we all know this from psychology. Teenage boys, our brains do not grow as fast as female brains. Teenage boys are not as mature as teenage girls. It's just a fact of life. I was there too at one time. And so you got to have really tough conversations with your children about doing the right thing when they are in certain circumstances. That's all I'm saying. This is just educational purpose information. It's not meant for somebody not to go out and have a good time at the spring break week or their prom or whatever they choose to do. You just want to educate the young folks out there so that they don't make mistakes in their life that they end up regretting for a very, very long time. My mother had a famous saying. She said, "Joe, the decisions you make today can and will affect you the rest of your life." And she was right. That always stuck with me, and I always remembered that. So there you go. You're listening to the Legal Lowdown on WERC in Birmingham, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. The second hour, we're going to have the Attorney General of Alabama, Steve Marshall, in the studio with us. You want to listen to that interview. He's going to give us an hour of his time. He's running for the United States Senate, so you don't want to miss that. Some state legal news here in the last week or so. The Anaya law case. Ibrahim Yazid, I hope I did I get that right? I did. Okay. I actually got one right for a change. We actually had the trial related to Anaya Blanchard, and he was found guilty. And the jury came back and decided that he would not get the death penalty, but for all intents and purposes, he hasn't been sentenced yet. It looks like he's going to get he's going to spend the rest of his natural life in prison in that case. And, that brings up the issue of whether a case is capital murder or it's felony murder. There's a difference in those two distinctions of crimes. And he was found guilty, but he was not given the death penalty by the jury. So that case has finally come to a conclusion here in the last week. Steve Marshall actually commented on that case. Quote, today a Macon County jury returned a murder verdict in the case of Anaya Blanchard. Although we are disappointed that the outcome does not allow for the death penalty, we intend to seek the maximum sentence allowed by law when the defendant is sentenced on May the 7th. So there you go. They're going to push for the maximum sentence, and I'm sure that the judge will probably go along with it, and that he will spend the rest of his days in a prison in Alabama. Something that has come up by the state legislature here in the last week or so, they are trying to pass the 10 Commandments to be put back in the school systems. I'm not against the 10 Commandments. Here is my concern. We keep having these issues. Roy Moore tried to put the 10 Commandments in the Supreme Court building, and a federal judge told him, you got to take it out. Can't be there. We've got a separation between church and state. You just can't do it. And some other states have done this as well lately. Up in Arkansas, they tried this, and a federal judge stepped in and told them they had to stop what they were doing. And so I don't have the answer here. I'm not against the 10 Commandments being in a schoolhouse. I just wonder if we're wasting time and resources on issues that have already been decided, and there are bigger issues to talk about than that are pressing at the moment. My personal opinion is, if you just want to take 5 minutes in the morning and have a moment of silence and people do whatever they want to do, fine. Just leave it at that. Enough said. But people have to run for office, and people take on these causes, and that's how you get these bills. Sometimes they pass, sometimes they don't, sometimes they get challenged, sometimes they get struck down. There you go. That's where you end up with the cases. So we shall see how this turns out. We talked about everybody's paying huge prices at the pump for gas. Former United States Senator Doug Jones came out this last week in the news about the gas prices. Guess what he suggested that the state do? Well, when you go buy gas, you pay tax on the gas as well. He said, why doesn't the state drop the tax for a while? That would save us probably about 30-something cents a gallon. Now, that would be something that the state of Alabama could really do to help people here, because we are not the richest state in the union. We are middle-class people by and large. 30 cents a gallon is huge for the average consumer on the street, especially me, because I just bought gas and I'm broke. So, folks, I encourage you to call your state representative or your state legislature and say, would you please stop the gas tax until the Iran war is over? Just ask them and see what they do. I think that would be a good thing to do. And we really need it, because we are just getting hammered with these gas prices right now. And it doesn't have anything to do with politics between Republicans or Democrats. We're all consumers at the pump. And it would make a huge difference if we saved a little money when we had to go buy gas. A case we talked about maybe a month or so ago. This case went up to the 11th Circuit. There was a gentleman that was stopped in his front yard. He was a pastor. They asked him for his ID. He didn't want to provide it. He was charged with obstructing governmental operations. His name was Pastor Michael Jennings. The 11th Circuit threw down the charges, said you can't do that. However, they did ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on whether or not a police officer has the right to ask you for your ID while they're doing an investigation. And the Supreme Court did come out last week, and Justice William Sellers wrote the opinion for the majority. And he concluded that the stop and identity theft law does not prohibit officers from requesting or demanding physical identification when a suspect gives incomplete or unsatisfactory responses. So, the law in Alabama is if police are investigating a crime or a situation and they see you near the situation and they say, "What's your name? Can I see your ID?" Well, you got to give it to them. You can't say, "I have nothing to do with this. I'm not involved. I'm not going to tell you who I am. I'm not going to show you my ID." If you have nothing to hide, just show them your ID. "My name's Joe Blow. Here's my driver's license. I'm just standing here." "No, I didn't see anything." That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Before we get to the bottom of the hour, just really fast update on the Alabama Public Service Commission. They've repackaged the law. They've called it the Power to the People Act now. The Power to the People Act. They've just repackaged the same thing they keep trying to pass. And they keep telling us how they're going to protect the consumers with the Alabama Power rates. And, by the way, we're going to appoint 4 people. We're going to have 7 people in the commission now, and 4 we're going to appoint. And by the way, the governor's going to appoint 2, and the state legislature is going to appoint 2. So we're going to have 7. But the thing is, once you get elected to a position in the state of Alabama, it is very hard to beat an incumbent in a race unless they are just not doing their job. So we're running really close here. We only have, I think, 1 more week left with the state legislature. So we're going to have to watch here in the next week to see if these laws get passed. I'm thinking they're going to die on the vine. The thing about Montgomery is they always pass a bunch of bills, but they never make it across the line to get signed by the governor. So I'm going to take a chance here and say that this Public Service Commission thing that's been it's just been all over the news here the last 2 months. We've covered it every week, how they keep repackaging it. I'm going to go step out on a limb. Hopefully I'm not wrong next week and say that the legislature gets out of town and they don't pass the Power to the People Act. But I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again, but maybe I'll be right on this one. As always, you're listening to the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. If you need my office, just look us up, joeingramlaw.com. We'll see you at the top of the hour after news and weather with Attorney General Steve Marshall. All right.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. He's a tough street-fighting lawyer with the highest ratings for honesty and integrity. He's here to answer your legal questions and get you the help you need. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Joe Ingram has more than 20 years' experience fighting for his clients here in the state of Alabama. Joe's focus is criminal defense and family law. You don't have to face your legal issue alone. You've got Joe Ingram on your side. In case of sensitive legal matters, you can always reach out directly to Joe at joeingramlaw.com and arrange for a private consultation. And now, Alabama's defender of the defenseless, protector of the people, and all-around good guy, Joe Ingram.
All right, we're back for the second hour of the Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. You're a Birmingham lawyer here on WERC 105.5. WBHP up in Huntsville and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. As I promised at the top of the hour and last week, we have the Attorney General of Alabama, Steve Marshall, here in the studio with me. General Marshall, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. I've listened to that intro. The prosecutor in me wants to push back, right, and say, hey, we're the defender of those that need defending. But no, grateful to be here, and thank you for having me.
General Marshall, it's an honor to have you, sir. All right, so General Marshall, my understanding is that you went to college up in North Carolina, correct?
Yeah, I am a Chapel Hill grad, which typically is a lot of fun during this time of year, right?
Yeah.
With Final Four and March Madness, but we're struggling a little bit in Chapel Hill. But yeah, my dad was one. We traveled all over the South. I'm from Alabama originally, but we lived in North Carolina during high school and had a great experience at the University of North Carolina.
And do I have this correct? You at one time you thought you wanted to fly jets for the Marine Corps?
Man, you've done some digging. Yeah, God's plan is not always your plan. And apparently you need good depth perception to be able to land jets. But yeah, I was initially in a program called PLC with the Marine Corps. And anyway, the eye physical did not go well for me. So anyway, we made a little bit of a change of plans after that. But respect what my friends in the military do, and thought I'd be one of them.
Great. Okay, so you go to Alabama Law School. You start practicing law. You worked at a firm here in Alabama. I think you spent some time with Maynard. At the time, it was Maynard Cooper Gale.
Right.
Then you decided to go up to Marshall County. So my question is, how did you decide to go to Marshall County?
Yeah, it's just there was for me, I was sort of 5 years into the practice of law, had worked with some amazing people, but the reason why I became a lawyer was probably fantasized in some ways, but I just saw lawyers arguing cases in front of juries. And what the practice I had, and you kind of know a little bit about kind of a big civil litigation practice. It's massive in documents, a lot of motion practice, but there's just not a lot of courtroom time. And I'm also a little bit more of a rural guy, and kind of as we've traveled and lived all over the South, it's always been kind of in smaller places. And I'm from Atmore originally, and Daddy's from Uri, and so small town Alabama is definitely in my blood. And it just sort of made a decision to go up there with someone that was from Guntersville originally, fell in love with it. First time I saw the Tennessee River and had a chance to go over the river bridge there in Guntersville. Met some remarkable people before I made that decision, and lucky enough to meet my late wife there, who was from Marshall County as well. And so it was just, dumb luck in some respects. It was one of the probably the hardest decisions I ever made, in the sense of walking away from a salary and a job with people you like, but it was the best decision I made to be able to ultimately find kind of my way in the legal profession.
Very good. All right, so I want to ask you about some issues that are really big topics, because you're running for the United States Senate on the Republican ticket. There's been a lot of news lately in the subject matter about Sharia law and all this stuff. And some people running for statewide offices have talked about that. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
So as a United States Senator, what is your stance on people's First Amendment right for freedom of religion?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have to defend fundamentally what the Constitution requires. And, look, the conversation around Sharia law, if you recall, I think it's been, 10 years ago in Alabama, we passed a statute that basically said courts are not going to use foreign law as a way of being able to interpret our contracts and kind of in your practice in the domestic area, and not allow that to be something that courts evaluate in the consideration of cases. And very much straightforward, not an effort to be able to suppress anybody's ability to exercise those fundamental First Amendment rights. And I think it's been effective here, as well as it's been, I think, now in almost 10 other states that maybe have passed it at some point in time. But I think the effort here in Alabama was not designed to somehow or another impede somebody's ability to freely exercise their religion, as much as to create a standard for courts and make sure they are acting consistent with our Constitution as far as the interpretation of the issues that are in front of them.
All right, very good. So next question I have for you, sir, and we're talking with Attorney General Steve Marshall, for all of you listening. We have a huge national debt. It's like $38 trillion.
Yeah, just I think actually may have just ticked up to 39.
Yeah, and every day we're spending $2 billion in a war. What are your thoughts as a United States Senator? Are there any departments you see that can be eliminated right off the top of your head? What is your thoughts on the national debt, sir?
Yeah, if we don't do anything about the fiscal crisis in this country, then we are failing our children and our grandchildren. And it means that we're going to have to make hard decisions to be able to get our financial house in order. Candidly, it's one of the beauties of the Alabama Constitution is the fact that we have a balanced budget requirement, and we ensure that we don't go past our means. And in fact, when there's those lean budget years, you and I are old enough to remember proration, and we make sure that we spend what we have coming in and we don't spend on the future by borrowing against the current situation. And, I think there's fundamentally several things we can do. Number one, we ought to adopt a balanced budget amendment to make sure we do that at a federal level, have that baseline. That's not going to happen overnight, but create a standard in which we can get there in a period of time in which we can allow that to be implemented. I think it is clear that the Department of Education has not been something that has enhanced or accelerated learning opportunities for our children. In fact, if you remember, it goes back to the Carter administration, and we don't see that our criteria used to evaluate educational opportunities for kids has gone up. And in fact, I think we can do a whole lot better by getting the federal government out of the classroom and make sure that we allow what should be local decisions on the education side to be able to be implemented. I think we need to go back as we begin to figure out how do we scale back that debt to pre-COVID era spending, because we saw an acceleration in the national debt that occurred during then. And then, there's multiple ways to be able to deal with it. I think that have been proposed. One of the interesting things to me was a plan from Heritage a few years ago that said we're going to take a penny a dollar away from all of the budgets in a way that we can incrementally get back to fiscal responsibility. But I think to the extent that I go to Washington and don't stand as a voice to try to address this issue, then I will have failed the people of Alabama. And it also means there's hard decisions that have to be made. And yet we need to make them, because when you're now $39 trillion in debt and your debt's going to exceed spending on national defense, then that's not the way that we need to operate good government.
Yeah. There's a lot of commentary, a lot of disinformation out there with cryptocurrency. there's people out there that are already talking about the big firms, whether it's BlackRock, J.P. Morgan, all the big banks that run the world, right? And I see all this commentary about the United States is already making plans to go to a digitized currency. Have you heard anything about that? What are your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, I've heard that being sort of spoken of on the internet. Not aware of any plan to go to a direct digital currency. I mean, look, crypto's an asset, no different than I did securities work when I was at Maynard, and different than other investments that are there. I do think there was concern, and even sort of putting my AG hat on a little bit on the consumer protection side and making sure that individuals were aware of what crypto was, how it is that they chose to do that investment, to make sure that we had some guardrails around crypto from a regulatory side, consistent with other types of investments to ensure consumer protection, but also not to impede innovation in the market. And I think crypto really is about, when we look at blockchain, significant innovation in the financial sectors. And so I think we've seen progress made with the adoption of the Genius Act to create stable coins, which I think now become kind of a baseline for which we can operate that we didn't have in the past. I do think there continues to be discussions around the Clarity Act. It needs to be, and that's really going to be that regulatory framework that's going on. But then there's kind of, and I don't know if it's part of your question, but I'll sort of reference it because I think it's important. There's a lot of discussion now around these predictive markets, Kalshi, Polymarket, and you've seen me weigh in as Attorney General on that I think it's really not a CFTC issue, but instead, really reeks more of gambling in some respects when you really look at it. And so, having said all that, I think crypto has its place, just as if you want to invest in stocks, bonds, and other types of investments. But we have to make sure that there are opportunities for consumers to be protected in those investments and have opportunities to make sure that they have knowledge of what it is that they are using their hard-earned dollars for purposes of their investments.
Yeah. I didn't have this question scripted, but I want to ask you because I had a case last summer.
You're a good lawyer that can go on the fly, right?
No. You're familiar with the term called pig butchering in cryptocurrency. You've heard that.
I've heard it. I'm not going to tell you I know a ton about it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll divulge that. I don't want to waste your time on that because your time's too important.
No problem.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about politics on a national level and running for politics and how the sausage is made up in Washington, D.C. Now everybody leaves a hearing or a briefing or, they meet with the administration and they're briefed on the Iran war. And they run out and they jump on Instagram and they start telling everybody what they just heard. So I want to ask you something because you and I are close to the same age. You got just a couple.
I'm a little bit older.
You got just a couple on me. Back in the day, Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill, as tough as they two were on their issues, they could still go to the Washington White House and sit down and talk about issues. In fact, the last time we had a national budget was Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich in 1994. I mean, they got together and they balanced the budget. In this world we're in now, General Marshall, with Instagram, all the social media platforms, do you think it's harder as a nation to try to solve the big issues that we need to really work on right now?
It's interesting, and I think you can appreciate this as lawyers. People always find it amazing that you and I could be adverse to each other in a case, heated with regard to what's going on in the courtroom, but yet walk out afterwards and have lunch. And you and I don't think anything twice about that, right? Maybe we have to wait a day if it's too heated, right? But yet, lawyers come from adverse perspectives, and yet, as you talk about the work that you do in settlements of your cases and plea bargains that go on with prosecutors, you have to find resolution because ultimately that's the only way to finalize what it is you're doing on behalf of your clients. And so, for me, I think I value the opportunity to be a very fierce advocate on behalf of the people I represent, whether it was as a local DA on the victims and law enforcement that were there, as Attorney General on behalf of the state of Alabama as a whole in defending our sovereignty. But one of the things that I think I've never lost sight of is the opportunity to accomplish the goal, to deliver value for the people that you represent. And sometimes that means that you just have to fight the fight. In our opioid cases, for example, $750 million. There were a couple cases where I just said I'm not going along with the national settlement because I didn't think Alabama was being treated fairly. We ended up, one of the cases we got offered 80, we settled for 124. Another we got offered 180, we got settled for 220 because I was willing to say I'm just not going to go along to get along, but instead I'm going to fight on behalf of the state. But there are also other cases in which it made sense to resolve it with the other side in a way that was consistent with what others were doing. And I think that has a lot to do with my mindset on the political side. I mean, there are certain things I'm not going to sort of go back on. For example, the Hyde Amendment has served as a valuable protection on life. And I've even heard the president talk about maybe we need to modify the Hyde Amendment a little bit to get something done. And that's just a line I'm not willing to cross. But also I have to make sure that that ultimately great's not the enemy of good, and we find ways and opportunities to be able to bring resolution on the issues of the day. And I think that's ultimately what folks in Alabama are going to be looking on me about, is not just whether I'm aligned philosophically in the right positions, but then am I able to exercise and use the authority given to me in the position, in this case, what I'm running for the United States Senate, to show tangible results. And I think that's the frustration that people have with Washington right now, is it's broken, that the apparatus there is not at all serving the people of this country well. And I want to be able to be somebody that makes a change there.
Very good. For those that are listening, we're talking with Attorney General Steve Marshall. He's running for the United States Senate on the Republican ticket. General Marshall, I've interviewed a lot of people that are running for the Public Service Commission this year. One of the biggest topics that's about to come upon us as a nation and as a state is talking about building data centers. What are your thoughts on data centers as a whole, and what do you think? There's always technology before you make legislation for it. And you know what I'm talking about here. Mm-hmm. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think there's several angles to the data center question. Number one, and this again is a little bit wearing my AG hat, the public in Alabama should not have to pay additional costs for heating and cooling their home, for general energy expenses as a result of bringing data centers into our state. Right, in that we know they are massive consumers of electricity, and it shouldn't be on the general public to have to assume the additional cost associated with that. And so as we are working on economic development, and although they don't bring a ton of jobs, obviously there is an investment as a result of their presence, we need to ensure that hardworking Alabamians aren't paying an additional cost for them to be here. So that's kind of a threshold question. Second, we are in an outright competition with China over who's going to ultimately control AI. And we've seen, and look, legal profession is being transformed as a result of AI. We see it in every aspect of our economy. This is a race that we can't lose, and we have to have the capacity through these data centers to be able to fight that fight and to be able to engage in that economic battle. And so there's no doubt that we need data centers to be able to do that. We just have to make sure that in the planning that we're doing, that we do it in a responsible manner. And so, look, communities have an opportunity and a say when things are brought into their community, whether it be the building of a new factory, the establishment of a new business. And by the way, some great things going on in the state when you see some of the recent announcements. But on the data center side, I think that we have to recognize they are needed, but we have to do it in a responsible way. And I'm hoping that we're going to find the ability to continue to investigate, this small nuclear reactor technology, the SMRs, to see whether or not those are vehicles to be able to do it. But we also, as somebody that's fought the Biden administration over energy policy as a while, part of what we're still dealing with in this country is the hangover from the effort of the Biden administration to eliminate the ability to use coal and fossil fuels effectively, because one of the greatest assets that we've had as a country, and one of the reasons why we're such an economic power, is that we've been able to provide cheap and affordable energy across this entire country. That became more problematic during this most recent administration, and I think to some extent, we were energy independent during Trump's first term. That changed during Biden's tenure, and we need to be able to continue to fight to make sure that we use the resources we have in this country to fuel our economic engine, and that includes going back and using effectively coal and natural gas to be able to do it. So it's a little bit of a long answer to be able to say, which is data centers we need. We need to make sure that consumers aren't paying the cost associated with the infrastructure and the consumption of those facilities. And then we need to be able to continue to explore new uses of technology or other energy sources, including SMRs, to be able to fuel what's going on at the data centers themselves.
All right, very good. As far as border security, I think since Biden's left, and we've had over a year now of the new administration, I think we've done a lot to tramp down the border. What are your thoughts on border security? And we have all these people that have already been adjudicated and need to self-deport, and we got a lot of people that are backlogged. We got a lot of federal immigration judges, and we got more people than we got judges. What's your thought on border security?
A couple of things on that. Somebody's been to the border during the Biden administration and then during President Trump's current term. It was absolutely refreshing to talk to Border Patrol agents less than a year ago to say we're finally liberated to do our job. It was interesting. You heard Kamala and Sleepy Joe talk about we need a new law to be able to secure the border. You didn't. You needed law enforcement to be able to do their job, and that's in fact what our Border Patrol agents have done. When you look at the plummeting numbers of those that have somehow or another crossed the border, it just shows that we have the ability to secure our southern border. And it's critically important, not only just with the illegal immigration issue, but equally as important to me is the rise in fentanyl that was coming across through the cartel, killing lives all across our country as a result of overdose deaths from that horrific drug. And so I think, number one, we've done a wonderful job through the Trump administration to secure that southern border in the right way. Hope we can continue, and it is work still continuing to make sure that we have that border wall there that's been an effective deterrent in many respects. But I think border security is one of the true success stories of this administration that we don't talk about enough. Second, on sort of the current situation, fully support ICE agents here in our state. In fact, got a bunch of them coming to the office next week just to continue to talk about the work that we're doing with 287G and those efforts to be able to remove those who are here unlawfully. I think you've heard Tom Homan speak pretty clearly about priorities and what they need to be. And as somebody, who just was briefed the other day on the story down in Mobile of the illegal immigrant that took 3 lives, including 2 children, somebody that had prior criminal record was released during the Biden administration after being arrested again, and he's still here. That shouldn't have happened. It's inexcusable, and 3 lives are lost as a result of that. And so I think the effort for us is to continue to target those who have prior criminal records or have committed criminal offenses here in our state to be able to remove them. And you're absolutely right. I mean, federal courts have decided certain due process that has to exist for those being deported, and we are still lacking federal immigration authorities to be able to adjudicate those claims and be able to exercise them, and hope that as a result of now our new head of DHS, that they're going to be able to ramp up the opportunities for those hearings to occur and for those deportations to be able to take place. But I do think, again, significant progress made on the border. President Trump made that a priority, and he's kept that promise.
Yeah, that's one of the big successes he's had so far. We're talking with Steve Marshall, Attorney General of Alabama. General, we're in a war with Iran. I don't care what the pundits call it. Anytime you have troops in harm's way, we're at war. My dad was in the military. What is your stand on this war with Iran right now? if you are a United States Senator?
Yeah, first of all, we got to acknowledge remarkable bravery and professionalism from our soldiers. I mean, we saw obviously what took place in Venezuela with the extraction of a indicted criminal when brought him back in skill and talent and planning that I don't think the world has ever seen before, in a way that we should be inherently proud. I think we continue to mourn the loss of lives of those in this community, that the pilots that died, that served here in Birmingham, and the families here that were impacted by it. I think we need to continue to be able to support them in our community. But you and I are not privy to all of the briefings that have taken place, and so somewhat from the public information, I've had an opportunity to be able to glean.
Well, we got to take a break. We'll be back in just a minute, folks. After news and weather. Bye.
You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram. If you need confidential legal help off air, reach out to Joe at joeingramlaw.com. Stay tuned for more. Joe will be right back after this break for news and weather. You're listening to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. Joe is a 20-year veteran of the Alabama courts specializing in criminal defense and family law. If you need a private legal consultation, email Joe at joeingramlaw.com. And now, welcome back to The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram.
All right, we're back for the final segment with The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram, your Alabama lawyer, on WERC 105.5 FM, WBHP up in Huntsville, and WRTR in Tuscaloosa. We have Attorney General Steve Marshall in with us today. Just a reminder, next week, folks, we get to have the other big candidate in the Senate race. Barry Moore will be here. General Marshall, we were talking before the break about the Iran war. Music kicked in. I want you to go back and talk about that, because that's going to be a really big issue when you're elected to the Senate.
Yeah, and acknowledged earlier about our military, and grateful for what they do. But I think there's no doubt that the conflict there is not one that is arisen simply over the last weeks or months or last year or so. This is a problem with Iran that goes back 40 plus years that President Trump is now attempting to deal with. They have been funding many of those who have engaged in terroristic activities across the world, including targeting Americans, whether it be Hamas, Hezbollah, some of the other terrorist groups that they have been able to use their resources to stand up. Clearly, we've heard this administration talk about the real and actual threat that they pose to American lives, and we have an opportunity and responsibility to address that. I think President Trump tried to use diplomacy, but was not able to be successful. And I think when you say something, you have to back it up. And if there's anything we know about President Trump, that's who he is. And so very much support the initiative of the administration and where they are right now. Having said all that, we need to know, I think, transparently as a nation, kind of where the end stop is and what it is that are going to be next steps. And while recognize that we have gathered troops in and around that region, my hope would be that we're not putting boots on the ground, that we create opportunities for the public in that area to be able to rise up and create a new government, new leaders that brings Iran back to be a responsible partner in the Middle East, as we've seen with many others. And while I agree the president has no need to consult with Congress at this point in time in the conflict, I think Americans are going to be looking to see resolution, partly as we look at the rising gas prices and the impact that's having on families across our state. And so continue to support the efforts of the president. Wished I knew a little bit more about the intelligence underneath it and where that stands, but also looking forward to the conclusion once we've had the opportunity to finish the job.
Yeah. You took some of my thunder. That's okay. This week they've announced that the 82nd Airborne has been deployed. We got roughly somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 Marines that have been deployed as well this week. And the big issue is over the next 10 days when he's issued this ceasefire is, are they going to take Karg Island or put boots on the ground? I don't think the American public has the stomach for that after what we went through in Afghan and Iraq. But I I think at this point we have to finish the job, whatever it is, because and if we don't, we're going to be back again.
Yeah, and we can't allow the Strait to become that strategic leverage for Iran when they simply want to exercise their authority in ways they couldn't before. And so we have to make sure that, number one, the mines are all gone, that they've lost their ability through any military to somehow or another coerce or stop the free flowing of particularly oil through that strait, and so that the issue that we're dealing with here in the short term does not become an issue again.
Yeah, very good. All right, so I got to ask you, if you go to the United States Senate, and I shouldn't say if because we're going to presume you're going to win, if the issue of health care gets to come up again about doing away with Obamacare in some form or fashion, what would be your thoughts on health care for the United States?
Yeah, I've thought of Obamacare twice as Attorney General with a coalition that tried to strike the statutes. As you recall, we were one John Roberts vote short in round one, and then when they removed the tax and took it up again, we were unsuccessful. And so, look, Obamacare, it was premised on this fundamental flaw of saying we're going to use this huge amount of student debt that we've put out there as the basis to be able to fund healthcare in our country. And then you had Joe Biden want to say, well, you don't have to pay back your student debt. It's not a shock that we're struggling to figure out how Obamacare is going to be able to continue. Look, I think as I've traveled the state, rural healthcare is a significant issue. In Alabama, I commend Senator Britt and Senator Tuberville for securing funding that's going to go to our rural hospitals to be able to help. But we have to have some plan that is sustaining. And, we may be at a point where you don't have the ability to completely eliminate Obamacare. But what we do have the opportunity to be able to do is stand up another market in which we allow for interstate competition. We remove many of the regulatory burdens that have impacted the ability for the market to be able to be more competitive in that space. And then let's make sure that we're driving dollars down to consumers to be able to make those healthcare decisions and choices rather than send that money directly to the insurance companies themselves. I do like the idea I think Senator Cassidy has had around healthcare accounts that are tax exempt, similar to kind of what we've done in other areas that allow for people to be able to dedicate even more dollars toward healthcare spending in ways
like a HSA.
Yeah. I think they're calling it a little different, an acronym, but very similar. But does, again, drive decision-making down to the individual taxpayer that otherwise is not securing their insurance from the private market, give them a greater ability to use their dollars in a way that makes sense for them and their families.
All right, very good. All right, so what is your position on term limits to serve in Congress?
No, I support that. In fact, I've signed on to a term limit pledge that would apply to both Senate and the House. And I think a little bit about my time as Attorney General is a little bit of a baseline for me. I've had folks say, gosh, if you weren't term limited, would you run for Attorney General again? And the answer has been no, because number one, uniquely, I will serve longer than anybody in modern history just because of the fact that I'll have 10 years rather than just 2 8-year terms. And so I feel like I've had, using a sports term, had extra innings, right, as Attorney General. It's been a remarkable privilege. But political office is not designed to be a profession. And to the extent that we don't acknowledge that there are other people with good ideas that have talent and unique skills that likewise can do the job, that number one, we have an ego that's not appropriate for public office, but also it's a failure to recognize kind of the republic that we were designed to be, is that to allow government to be able to act from the consent of the governed. And why shouldn't we want new ideas and new faces to be able to come in a way that allows for there to be opportunities for many people to be able to serve? So having said all that, absolutely support term limits.
All right, very good. So you announced that you're going to run for the Senate. Other people jump in. Then President Trump comes out and he gives his backing to Barry Moore. J.D. Vance jumps on the bandwagon. So does Senator Thune, who is head of the Senate caucus. What's your thoughts on that for the race?
Yeah, I mean, look, anybody would want President Trump's endorsement, and yet it doesn't cause me not to be able to support the agenda of the president. But also, I will say this, I've been pretty specific in saying I think the Trump administration right now has an opportunity to rectify a wrong around mifepristone. The FDA has the ability to schedule that drug in the way from a prescribing side that could eliminate these mail-order abortion drugs coming into states across the country that otherwise, like Alabama, have abortion illegal. And so the fact I support the president doesn't mean I'm also not going to speak out when I don't agree with something that's going on, and that's one of those things. Look, I'm extremely proud that farmers across Alabama have given me their endorsement. 50 sheriffs and chiefs around our state have stood in my corner. We got job creators from builders and contractors to home dealers and home builders that are Alabama folks that have seen what I've been able to do as Attorney General and believe in me for the United States Senate. And I believe in some ways maybe this race is shaping up to be D.C. versus Alabama, and I'm pretty proud to be the Alabama candidate.
All right, very good. I've seen some polls, and I saw a poll in February, and roughly you were up over Barry Marshall. And then I saw another poll, I think March the 6th, and Barry was 22 and you were 16. What are you hearing back on the campaign trails where the polls are right now?
Yeah, I think, of course, the ultimate poll is May 19th, and
Right.
so that's the one that we worry about the most. I think to some extent when you see early polls have a lot to do with name recognition, and folks aren't really sort of narrowed on the race. And right now, Barry Moore, through his own campaign or outside groups, has spent over $6 million, but yet one of the groups that's supporting him came out with a poll this week that said our race was 5 points. I hadn't moved the needle very much for the Moore campaign, and we haven't spent a dime on broadcast media at all yet. And so we're going to have an opportunity now in what is clearly the stretch run of this campaign to be able to share the story of why I believe that I'm the best candidate for this job. And I think my record as Attorney General really reflects that, is that we've taken on the tough issues that Alabama has faced. I've been that conservative warrior and voice, and then we've been able to deliver specifically to the people of Alabama. And I think we now have an opportunity to be able to litigate that message across voters in our state, and excited and believe strongly that we're going to prevail on that front.
Do you think there's going to eventually be a runoff in the top two candidates for the Senate on the Republican side?
I think if any political sort of pundit would tell you that with the number of candidates that are in it and quality folks, and by the way, enjoyed meeting folks I didn't know, whether it was Rodney Walker, who I just know as a result of this. Jared Hudson and I have actually worked together and knew Jared before, a good guy. I think the likelihood is yes, that there will be a runoff, and then that becomes that 4-week sprint. I'm not unfamiliar to a runoff, having during my 2018 election had a runoff against Troy King, who used to serve in the role that I'm in. But I think everybody wants to try to get to that 50+1. But I think the likelihood in multiple races, because of the number of people running, is you'll see runoffs going on.
Let me ask you, the runoff election is going to be in June, right? That's tough because in the month of June, most people are going on vacation,
Right.
doing all this other stuff. So as a candidate, and I've never been there, what are you thinking about? I mean, you're thinking, gosh, we got to get people to the polls because this is it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is reflective of our strategy, which is to build the best grassroots organization of any of the campaigns. I mean, we have made, over 100,000 calls. We have knocked on thousands of doors already. We have got coordinators in almost every one of our counties, multiple coalitions from different groups that are supporting us word of mouth. And I think that's where our strength is going to lie. And so as we look at, again, that runoff limited period and what's already a busy summer for most people's lives, that's where your grassroots effort is going to reflect itself the most. And so we've tried to be intentional and strategic about how we've planned this entire campaign. And I think that's one of the things that will be in our benefit.
Very good. We got about 13 minutes left with General Marshall. General, I got a couple of questions I want to get to really fast. And then I want you to talk about your platform for the state of Alabama as United States Senator. I've heard you talk about how you loved Ronald Reagan. You thought he was a great communicator. I've also seen how you loved John Adams and what he did for the country. So I'm asking you a little question here. You get to have a little dinner party. Ronald Reagan's there, John Adams there. You get two others. Who would be the other two?
So do I have a time frame in which?
This is your dinner party.
Oh, wow.
General.
Wow. Look, I've always been fascinated by Jefferson as well. It's hard to believe that, we're about to celebrate, and I've been practicing this word, by the way, semi-quincentennial. But he was 33 years old when he was crafting the Declaration of Independence, which you and I sort of see probably less as a government document and more like an indictment in what, part of your normal practice. So I think Jefferson would be one of those. Who would be the other in modern? I'm going to take a little bit more modern times. And it's only because he was a boyhood hero of mine. This is going to be really random to you. But I've had the greatest admiration in my life for Hank Aaron, an Alabama guy who overcame remarkable hurdles, was an amazing gentleman and statesman, and as a kid from South Alabama, lifelong Braves fan, he was my idol as a kid. And so that's a weird combination, I know, but I'd always wanted to be able to meet him before he passed, never had that opportunity, and would love to hear somebody that could talk about perseverance, endurance, and excellence. And he, I think, represented all those things.
Yeah. He had death threats. He had all kinds of things, and he persevered every day on the field, and nobody knew what he was really going through.
Yeah, and just an amazing ambassador for everything that was good. Very good.
All right. So now that we've asked a lot of the questions, General Marshall, tell the people of 2/3 of North Alabama Talk Radio why you should be elected to the United States Senate.
Yeah, in 10 seconds or less. No,
no.
You
actually have, General. You've got about 7 minutes.
Yeah, interestingly, and I don't expect people to have followed this. I thought I was done with politics when AG was going to be over. I did want to run for governor and made that publicly known many, many months ago. And interestingly, I jokingly tell people that I've been deployed to Montgomery, because you do, I don't know whether you know this, you actually have to live in Montgomery as part of the Constitution. And so Tammy and I, my wife, were trying to figure out kind of where we'd go and what we'd do next. And then get a call from Coach Tuberville saying, hey, I think I'm maybe coming home. Just wanted you to be aware. And that's what even began sort of the process of thinking about running for the United States Senate. And for all the reasons I was not interested in becoming governor, running for the United States Senate was absolutely intriguing, because many of the battles that I've had as Attorney General, fighting for Alabama's sovereignty, pushing back against an overreaching federal government, defending people in violations of their individual liberties, is very much germane to the work of a United States Senator. The ability as a lawyer, the ability as a prosecutor, and now as the Attorney General, to be the voice and advocate for those who needed help, that those that were looking for change, you have that opportunity as a United States Senator on the many issues that come before them. But within that is not just to cast a vote, not just to be able to be aligned correctly, but to truly be able to deliver. And that's what I think I bring to the table compared to everybody else that's in this race. I mean, we are a conservative state, and I think everybody running for this office has staked out conservative positions. I think the question from the standpoint of leadership is, in the role that you've had, and particularly for me in public service, what have you done that's delivered, that made the lives of people better? And I think, we talked about it a little bit earlier, really proud of the $750 million that we brought into our state to address the opioid crisis that we're having, 30% reduction in overdose deaths just in the last year. And it took a significant lift and fight, and I was willing to do it and proud of what we've been able to do there. I think Alabama saw that when we needed a conservative voice and warrior pushing back against the Biden administration, I stood in the breach. And anything from what we saw during the COVID vaccines and the mandates that were going on there and our ability to push back and win multiple cases, the fight around energy policy because it mattered to the pocketbooks of Alabamians and what we were going to be able to do there. And then maybe the thing that, again, I'll take with me when I leave this role is the fight around preserving girls' sports, girls' locker rooms, and ending the insanity of gender-affirming care when we were putting testosterone shots in the legs of girls and, God forbid, surgeries with scalpels to the bodies of children. And when others weren't willing to fight, we stood up and we did and delivered results, not just for kids in Alabama and our country, but also internationally, and really proud of that. And then we've made sure that we've aligned ourselves with folks that have been willing to exercise appropriately their First Amendment rights, because that's what Alabamians are. They're a principled, God-fearing citizenry who cares about one another. And when it makes it a football coach who wants to pray in the middle of a football field after a game, or a cake baker in Colorado who wants to stand consistent with his principles, or even some Amish farmers who don't want to be compelled to do something against their religion because the state of New York says they want to do it. Again, these people of Alabama have been willing to fight. It's why, despite the fact that Barry Moore serves on the committee that deals with agriculture, Alabama farmers believe in my leadership and have supported me. It's why when Alabamians right now are struggling on the economic side and are looking for someone to be able to champion their issues, they've trusted me and believe that I can be able to help deliver in what are right now significant affordability questions across not only our state but our nation. And then I think they're looking for somebody that's not going to go to Washington just to go along and get along. You said it earlier. I'm not the choice of Washington. You have Senator Thune, who right now can't get the SAVE Act across the finish line, endorsing somebody else in this race. I'm okay with that because I have an incredible amount of independence to go up there and be loyal to only one constituency, not somebody that's put $5 million into my race or another person that's put $1.25 million in my race like they have one of my opponents. My loyalty is to the people of Alabama, and that's who I'm going to stand up and fight for. And look, I know it's a remarkable privilege for the people of Alabama to designate you as their United States Senator. Katie Britt needs a partner ready to be able to do that for her as well. And if given that opportunity, and I don't want to be remarkably humbled, but I'll fight every day for the people of the state, just as I've done as your Attorney General and just as I've done as a prosecutor for many, many years.
Very good. Got just a couple minutes left, Gerald Marshall. Actually, we got about 3. You've been on the campaign trail. You're counting the days down to the primary. I ask every candidate here, what's it like every day? You just get up and they tell you where to go. Are you getting worn out yet?
It's exciting, but I've got a day job too, right? I mean, the issues involving the state as Attorney General don't end. I mean, you may have seen the announcement this week dealing with this synthetic kratom that's invaded our state and pushing back and making sure that we're doing it. So I think the biggest struggle is just staying good as a good leader for the office that the people elected me for, but also being able to get out there and see folks and share the vision of what we are. I mean, look, there's anything, I'm not going to win the drop the mic moment on social media. I'm never going to be that guy. I value those one-on-one conversations I have with people across the state, and that's what really the exciting thing for me on the campaign trail is really those moments just to talk to folks that I represent and share with me transparently what it is they need and what it is that they want. And that is energizing in many respects, but there's no doubt I look forward to spending a few more dinners at home with my wife, getting to bed a whole lot earlier, and maybe having a Saturday off. But I've tried to preserve
6 weeks.
Yeah, I've tried to preserve my Sabbath and to make sure that they're there. But hey, I raised my hand because I thought I could serve the people well, wanted to give them an opportunity or an option in this race from somebody that has demonstrated what they can do as a public servant, and have immense trust that God's plan is going to be reflective in whatever this election result is going to be. And if I get to serve as United States Senator, then by golly, I'll be amazed at the opportunity for this Atmore boy to be able to do it. And if I'm going to do something else, then I'm also okay with that too. So it's liberating in that way to know that, that your identity is not defined by public office, but instead by who you are in my relationship with Jesus Christ. But also, I trust the people of Alabama to figure out what's in their best interest, and we'll see what that is come May 19th.
Very good. General Marshall, I want to tell you, sir, thank you for serving our state for the last 10 years, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and speak with me today, sir.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and this wasn't, you were refined cross-examination skills. This was a conversation, so thank you for that.
Very good. All right, folks, next week we have Barry Moore in the house. You want to listen to that. This is my final thought for the day. I found a poem from my father's desk, and it goes a little bit like this. The master in the art of living draws no distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his pleasure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing, and he leaves it up to others to decide whether he is work or play. Gotta go. Have a good week. Gotta go. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Legal Lowdown with your lawyer, Joe Ingram of Joe Ingram Law. Don't forget to follow Joe's Legal Lowdown podcast on iHeart. If you need a private legal consultation, reach out to Joe on his website, joeingramlaw.com. Tune in again next Saturday for The Legal Lowdown with Joe Ingram. No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services performed by any other lawyer.